Bonjour à tous. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la conférence de presse des Intranquilles de Joachim LAFOSSE. Je vous rappelle les règles habituelles. Si vous avez
customary rules. If you have a question to ask, raise your hand, stand up, introduce yourself, ask your question, and sit back down immediately.
Si par hasard vous avez l'obligation de quitter la conférence de
If you
presse
have
avant
to
la
leave
fin,
the press conference before the end, please bend over so you don't bother the cameras just behind. This press conference will last for 40 minutes. I'd like to begin by introducing the team for The Restless, the director of the film, Joachim LAFOSSE.
sa monteuse, Marie-Hélène Dozo.
The editor, Marie-Hélène Dozo.
Au bout de la table,
At the far end of the table, the DOP, Jean-François Engens.
son interprète masculin, Monsieur Damien Bonnard.
Damien Bonnard, the male actor.
Et son interprète féminine,
And Leïla BEKHTI, the actress.
Et alors, au premier rang,
At the front row, here,
combien les applaudir aussi, nous avons les
you
quatre
can give them a round of applause, the 4 producers of the film.
KUPERMAN, Alexandre GAVRAS et Jani THILTGES. Oui, ça se prononce comment?
How do you pronounce the name, really?
C'est à peu près ça?
Was I nearly there?
Pas mal? Bon.
Not bad. Okay, thank you.
Donc, levez la main pour vos questions.
Raise your hand if you have questions, and in the meantime, I'll begin.
D'abord, je vais vous poser.
First of all, I'd like to ask the first question to Joachim.
Bien sûr, c'est un film sur la.
This is a film on bipolar disorder.
Les limites de l'engagement amoureux.
It's perhaps a film about the limits of a loving relationship. Yes, absolutely.
Moi, je suis vraiment très heureux de ce.
I'm very, very pleased to see the end result of the film. For the past 30 years, I've been making films.
Je vais pas le cacher, c'est une partie.
I'm not going to hide the fact that the seeds of this film date back to my childhood. And this film reminds me of emotions that I had forgotten as an adult, and I find that quite fantastic.
Mes parents voient le film il y a 2 jours.
My parents saw the film 2 days ago at home, and so we were able to share these wonderful moments about the film.
Vraiment dingue dans
What I find absolutely incredible.
dans l'altérité que ma petite histoire, on s'en fout. Mais
Well, my personal story doesn't matter at all, but what really counts is the actors and the DOP and the editor's input.
avec Jean-François Engens, c'est
Together with Jean-François Engens,
essayé de
we've always tried
sans être. Enfin, je pense qu'on essayait d'arriver à mettre en place quelque chose.
to find some kind of method to make a film. I don't like the word method. And suddenly things just fell into place because we met people
Saisie de ce qu'on leur propose.
who were deeply interested in what we were offering them.
J'ai pas assez de talent pour
I don't have enough talent to find things all by
pas
myself.
chercher avec les autres.
I have to look together with other people. But sometimes people don't like that. I have made films with people who didn't like that way of going about things. But with Leïla and Damien,
Leïla s'empare de ce qui leur arrive.
well, Leïla and Damien really plunged into their characters, and we discovered together the limits of their relationship.
C'est un point de rencontre aussi.
It's also a possible meeting point, what happens to them.
Voilà. Et donc, Damien et Leïla, ce sont...
Damien and Leïla
cette façon de faire, ça a été
fully fitted in with our way of going about things, and it was wonderful. I'm a journalist in Belgium. Congratulations on this film, which deeply moved me. I thought the actors were just right on and so intense. Probably you had to prepare a huge amount beforehand in order to achieve that kind of intensity. Damien and Leïla kept their own names. Why that choice? We were very fortunate to be able to rehearse for 10 days before starting the shooting. That's very rare when you make a film. And the film was shot in the same setting, in the house. Sorry, my mask is all mixed up in my hair here. And that helped us no end. We were able to rewrite certain scenes, a thing you don't have time to do during the shooting. But we kept writing and rewriting things. The shooting kept changing. Nothing was set in stone, and that was great. There was a real understanding between the two of us, over and beyond just the emotions. We really agreed on the way we go about our work. I take my work very much to heart, and we felt very free. We could say what we thought, and it was wonderful because it saved us a lot of time. We didn't have to search for the right word. Everything just happened. Those 10 days of rehearsals were very helpful. And as to the first names, it was the last version I think you'd written. And we saw that in the script, the names Leïla and Damien appeared. And Damien and I hid behind a door and said, does that bother you? I said, I don't care. And what about you? And he said, well, I don't care either. We realized how much work we had ahead, and we decided not to focus on this tiny detail. So it worked out extremely well. Okay, we had the same first names as we do in real life, and during the rehearsals we could really delve into the various scenes and find the right tone, the right way of doing things. So when the shooting actually began, we were ready because we'd started a week previously. There's something I learned thanks to the painter in the film. He said, well, when the canvas is white, he dirties it because he doesn't want to act, he wants to react. And we never started with a blank page, a white page. We always reacted to things that existed, and that makes the scenes far more powerful because you can just improve on things. And when I sensed that Damien was really going to espouse his character, there were things I didn't know how to finish the film. I had two ideas. There were two pages, different pages for the final scene. And once we'd finished the rehearsals, intuitively, I proposed to Damien and Leïla, I said, well, you're going to decide how the film's going to end. In other words, depending on your experience with your characters on the last day of the shooting, we'll decide how it ends. You'll decide whether you want to leave or not. I've never done that before, and I probably will never do it again. And when they took that decision, they opted for that ending. Did it suit you, or did you say, oh, shoot, when they made that decision? It was really moving because they were worried about their decision. Of course, we bore huge responsibility. And Leïla said, are you sure that's okay for the ending? It lasted for 10 hours. It started at 8 a.m. and at 6:30, we thought we could go back home thinking we'd taken the right decision. In fact, what I discovered, thanks to them, was that they felt there was a huge responsibility in making that choice, and that could be the beginning of a wonderful love story. And there are two ways of meeting people, conscious and subconscious. You can't suddenly decide that you want to meet someone. It doesn't work that way.
Mademoiselle, une question.
Bonjour.
Hello. I work for a record publisher. Thank you for this film. I have a question to Damien Bonnard. You were talking about a painting, and I think you studied fine arts in France and in Belgium. And apparently you said that you have to do things so quickly you don't have time to contemplate things. During the shooting, what was your relationship with actual painting? Could you talk about that link in the film? Painting, fine arts. I studied fine arts when I was very young. I was 16 years old, and I finished at the age of 22. It taught me, above all, how to look at the world, and I didn't go to high school, and I learned a lot of philosophy when I was studying fine arts, but I was a very bad artist, despite the fact the subject interested me. In terms of having time to contemplate the world, people spend more time looking at their mobile phone than looking and observing the world. That lies at the heart of the film. Within this family, within this couple, all they see is Damien's symptoms, the diagnosis, the bipolar disease. And that's what's happened to us over the last 18 months. Everyone is so afraid of COVID, yet there are many other problems apart from COVID, and there are some wonderful things to think about. And it's not that if you contemplate only these very narrow subjects that you're going to resolve the problem. The film, well, it's hard for people to remain curious about life when such a diagnosis is made. Yet you have to continue to live and to reflect and to grow as a person. In the course in my real life, I'm not a painter at all. I've worked with painters, though, a Belgian painter called Mathieu, the only woman in the movement comprising Rothko and others. And then I worked in the artist's studio, and painters work all alone. And I saw how he was in real life and how he looked at cars passing by. He looked at cars passing by with the eyes of a painter, and that's not the way I look at things in life. So I stole all this from him because I needed it in the film. I stole his gestures, his way of doing things. And he showed me all he knew about Goethe and others, and he allowed me to really touch and handle his paints. Look him up on Instagram. The work done by this artist is quite stunning. It's so beautiful. And he was incredibly generous. He's an artist, and he agreed to paint with Damien for the sake of the film. Also, he agreed to lend us his studio. He moved out of his studio practically for us. Sorry, I'm so tired. I find it difficult to find the right words. I couldn't remember the name of the painter, sorry, but he was quite amazing. Of course, I think I don't want to sound moralistic, but I think we have to raise our eyes and start looking at things again. It's important to spend an hour looking at a painting that does you good, or listening to a record, or watching a film. So just to continue about painting and the actual setting in the film and turning to the DOP, you chose a given way of filming. You're like a portrait artist. You film faces from very close up, the upper part of the actors' bodies, as though that was a way of painting the portraits of the characters all the time. Was that a deliberate choice? Did you do all these close-ups? What about the lighting, which is so gentle? Talk to us about these choices. In fact, I love portrait artists. They really move me. Julien Magre is so very sensitive, and he helped us with the film. Jean-François, did you want to answer that question? Yes, the question was for him as well. Joachim, when he makes a film, creates a sort of a ballet, a dance between the actors, the lighting. He's like an orchestra conductor. And at a given point in time, things appear very natural and harmonious with the camera. This is all achieved thanks to the 10 days of rehearsing, the advanced preparation. We also talk matters over with Joachim. He talks about films, gives us certain references and background information, and then we delve into the work. And it proceeds very smoothly. And we were able to propose certain angles which he was happy with. Technically speaking, the situations are very difficult to shoot. When Damien is painting, he's not pretending to paint, he's really painting. And things never stop. There's a scene where he was in a manic phase and he paints for 25 minutes without stopping. It goes on and on and on. And there's a kind of harmony and bond between us, which is extremely pleasant as a DOP. And that made it possible to achieve the result you see on the screen. Yes, it lasted for a very long time. After this scene, I felt very stiff. My muscles were sore. We were a very close-knit team. We wanted to do everything we could to produce a realistic painting scene. The frame moves sideways, but from front to back as well. And we had a DOP assistant who contributed so much to the film. I think he's quite a genius, and he was free to choose how to move the frame. It wasn't I who made the decision. With these images, you can move from Leïla to Damien, for example. You can adopt different kinds of movements, and this was not my decision. I find what this person achieved is totally fantastic, splendid. I think it's pathetic to talk about naturalism, realism. That's not what we're trying to do. Everything was written out in detail while remaining very spontaneous. This is a film where the group plays an important part. The team really wanted to make the film, and everyone was very kind and generous. It was a wonderful moment, but difficult at the same time. It entailed a huge physical and intellectual effort, but it was a great pleasure to be on the set. What I'd like to know is how subsequently this incandescent material, well, what do you do with this moving material, this incandescent material, when it reaches you for the editing? Damien and Leïla
J'allais poser la question. Alors, allez-y, oui.
Directed themselves almost.
Comment ils ont dirigé? Ce sont eux qui ont dirigé Gabriel Mers-Chama.
Gabriel Mers-Chama, for example. I never spoke with Gabriel.
Après, on laisse peut-être parler.
Perhaps we'll give the floor to Marie-Hélène, and then you can talk about this family, the triangle. Well, I just have to slip into all this because there's already such energy in terms of the takes and the actors, and I have to slip into that to find a happy balance and create the timeline in the film. So you have to listen to people carefully. In any event, I think each film is different. I think that for each film there are different decisions and issues and difficulties. Everyone, I think, feels that a film is group work. And when it comes to the actual editing, you receive this film with everyone's energy that has been invested therein, and then it takes a couple of weeks to do the editing. But you probably got instructions from Joachim. I think I made 2 versions of this film. We looked at the rushes together, and that was extremely interesting for me, because I don't always do that kind of thing. We discuss things at length. We ask certain questions. What are we trying to say? How are we going to say it in the film? And I always come in quite late because the film had been in the director's mind for many years, and the actors had worked on the film, and I come in almost last. So I did a first edited version, which flowed together with the movement of the film. And then, of course, you have to find the final version. Well, the first version made by Marie-Hélène. Well, I find it increasingly satisfactory to let Marie-Hélène do her thing. And she may make something slightly different from what I have imagined, but I'm happy with that. The first version I got from Marie-Hélène, well, I saw the first 25 minutes of the film proposed by Marie-Hélène, and that wasn't what was in the screenplay at all. And I said to myself, wow, this is cinema in a way that I've never imagined it. The pace, the gentleness are outstanding. So let's go back to the triangle, the family, in other words. Mommy, Daddy, and the little boy. Before talking about the young actor who's so talented, Gabriel, I'd like to talk about your 2 parts, Leïla and Damien.
Leïla, vous avez un rôle qui... Le mot de réaction, on l'a cité tout à l'heure,
mais talked about reaction. Your character always has to react. It's tricky because you are the recipient, so to speak, and you are the recipient of all these things, and then something emerges from it. What was it like to just react all the time during the shooting? What would you like to say about the character? I didn't want to turn the character into a victim. She decides to take care of her husband because she loves him very much, and that's important. So she is subjected to many things, but she's not a victim. She's perhaps a collateral victim, considering what happens, but she hasn't made it a real issue. She knows why she's there, why she does things. She loves her husband deeply. She loves her family and wants to save it at all costs. That's what I loved in the screenplay. Joachim, when I read the screenplay for the first time, I thought he had a vision which was not black and white of the couple. There's the couple is so close because they love each other dearly, and then you have this madness, the madness of my husband in the film, and that's what contaminates the relationship of the couple, because this daily madness force is there. What I loved in my character was this madness which goes from body to body, person to person. I like the idea that this woman is very down to earth, whereas he is a painter. She restores furniture, she repairs damaged things, and in her mind, her husband is damaged, because that's what the couple is all about as well. There's something in the rehearsals that really helped us to make the film in this way. I think that we share the same idea, in fact. It's tough to become engaged in this day and age. You can't just try to run away. You have to try and stay and go through with it. You can't just run away when you encounter the first difficulty. We're not throwaway objects. People can change as well. You have to try. What's really crazy, well, I don't know why I'm mentioning 10 years, but the idea is to try to see things through. Of course, it depends on each individual, but I like this idea that the couple is deeply in love, and I like the idea that you can live on love. At least with you, I could live just on love, as long as I have custody of the kid. Damien, what's interesting in the film is that there's your bipolar disorder, but there's a lot of paranoia about your disorder. Once the diagnosis has been made, everyone looks at you through that filter, even things that could be just enthusiastic or full of joy. You're not even allowed to be more joyful than many people are in real life. Everyone views you through this filter, that is paranoia. Yes, absolutely. How can you share things with people who you love if you go too far without talking about a pathology or a disease? How can we cope with these things without being crushed? You're here for other people, but at the same time, you can't go too far. There are all sorts of changes you have to contend with in your life while keeping many things in common. That's what you see in the film. When it comes to the actual disease, it's terrible to say to yourself, well, for me it was horrible to say to myself, I love my family, but I'm pushing them towards a kind of a death. I'm making the ship sink. That was a horrible idea when it dawned on me. We created beautiful sails to be able to travel off, and yet the boat is sinking. That dimension was there from the very beginning of the film. I think that my father suffered terribly. Damien in the film is not just a person who's bipolar. He's a painter, he's a father, he's in love with his wife, just like Leïla. Leïla realizes she can't be just a nurse. She's also a woman, in addition to being a furniture restorer. And that's what I'm trying to say in the film. They mustn't lose sight of all this, or they realize they're losing sight of it, and then they try to just grapple with the situation and continue. As a child, it was really terrible what I went through. Even today, and that's my problem, I have to go for care. It's not the problem of the person who was diagnosed as ill. People are now starting, but not sufficiently, to apply this kind of attitude to people with mental disorders, be it schizophrenia or something else. You shouldn't just look at the person like a symptom. The patient is also a person, and that's of fundamental importance. When you suffer from this kind of a situation, it's very difficult not to become trapped in the situation and to lose your curiosity. I worked with doctors in many places. I spent days and days with people who suffer from the same disease, and some people had been diagnosed 20 years previously, yet they'd hidden the fact from their family because they didn't want to become trapped in the label. Either their family would feel ashamed or might not accept, would not understand, yet they would be imprisoned in the idea, the name of the disease. And my father understood that. He said, you must realize that you can do something once you've been diagnosed with this kind of disorder. The film is called The Restless. It's a homage to Gérard Garouste, who's a wonderful painter, and he wrote a book called The Restless. And he tells the story about the character and how the character was hospitalized. He talks about psychosis. Okay, medicine is one thing, but it's not everything. It's not just chemical. I think it's necessary to invest a lot in support for mentally ill patients. It's necessary to work on the real roots of the problem because you can't boil everything down to chemistry. You talked about your childhood. There is a child, a little boy, who acts amazingly well in the film, Gabriel Merschama. People often say that when there's a child in a film, a child when the parents are divorcing, the children aren't filmed much. They're usually relegated to the sidelines. Here, the little boy is at the center of this paranoia, this triangular relationship. He deeply admires his father, but is extremely worried. How did you direct him? How did the mother and the father help this actor? There's some scenes where we're really scared for the child and his little friends. It's very subtle, the way of filming things, and you feel afraid for the little boy. That's why, at one point in time, when the character is suffering from a manic bout, he's put in hospital. How does one work with a child, but a child who's so young and who seems to understand so fully what's happening? Would you like to say something? Don't hesitate to interrupt. There's something which is quite clear. Gabriel belongs to a family which has always worked in the cinema, and he knows full well that it's not real. He spent most of his childhood on a set. He sees his parents coming and going because they work on a set. I don't like to direct children. Children know how to act naturally. You have to put them in the right environment, and then they manage all by themselves. Sometimes you have to rehearse a little bit, but Gabriel was hugely courageous. I discovered this in another film. In fact, you have to leave things up to the actors. And Damien is quite incredible. He manages all by himself. It was a huge pleasure working with him. When you shoot a film with children, it's very difficult because they represent the truth, and it's up to us to live up to them and their truth. There's a moment of truth above all. I was fascinated by Gabriel. He acted very well and was able to listen so well. He's there, But not there at the same time. He fascinated me. As Joachim said, he wasn't at all impressed. He was just there. I had my children. He often spent the night at home with my children. We were like a family. My children are the same age. And what was really fantastic was to tell him about the scenes. We didn't want him to learn anything by heart. And he reacted so well. As soon as something was changed, he reacted. We didn't have to tell him beforehand. Of course, there weren't going to be 10 or 12 takes with Gabriel, because as a child, that would be rather off-putting. So he stayed the way he was, a little boy. Even when writing the character of the child, I thought the character was very autonomous. Gabriel gave us a great deal. We could film what we were dreaming of filming, and the takes are absolutely magnificent. A lot of things were conveyed not by words. How do you look at your mother? Well, there's no... At one point he says, there are no books, yet there were 20 on the bookshelves. This kind of thing wasn't written in the screenplay. And I believe that you have to work a lot on the screenplay, granted, but you have to be able to stand back from what's written. Sometimes you give adult lines to children. Sometimes children cry like adults, whereas they should be allowed to cry like children. Gabriel is extraordinarily mature in his acting. I think he's very mature in life because he observes people so well. During the takes, we said, "Oh, Gabriel, that was great," and he was so pleased. And he wanted Mr. Freeze, a sort of reward and an ice cream, and he thought that was very neat. He was incredibly intelligent. There are lots of things which weren't written in the screenplay. We needed to create this family, to create close ties, and they were created as of day one. Everything just fell into place very naturally, and then these bonds grew stronger. With you and Gabriel, and the family really existed in real life almost. It wasn't just a question of creating something on a set. The something had to be real. And watching adults like this for 2 months or 3 months as a child, it's not easy. I think we'll have to stop soon. I just wanted to put one last question. There are no questions in the room? Could you perhaps all talk about this idea of fear, this fear which permeates the atmosphere, which is bound up with the idea of love, trust, fear? How did you feel this fear, and how do you film it?
Cette intranquillité, en fait.
In fact, this restlessness. Well, my fear was mainly based on the idea of loss, because that's what was happening because of my disease. I said this yesterday in an interview. Even if the family is chaotic, is a bit rough, there are disagreements, it's a family that I really miss now. And I said this yesterday. If I have a bit of money soon, I'll buy an island, which I'll call Restless, and it's a place I'll be able to go to for refuge, for shelter. I'm afraid, however, I won't be able ever to buy this island, but I'll do my best. We'll go and pick up Gabriel and take refuge on this island. I think it's good to be able to put restlessness to one side. This fear,
parliez
La peur, c'est ta question.
Fear, that was your question.
J'aurais presque envie de terminer là sur cette
Ah oui?
question.
Well,
La
I'd
peur
almost
ou le
like to
cœur?
finish with that question.
cœur, le
Fear
sur le
or
Bah oui.
heart,
Voilà.
the
Sur
heart.
une île et
Well,
sur un
on
cœur.
an island
Bon, bah, écoutez.
with a big
Merci
heart.
beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Merci, Leïla.